For Couples podcast, where our goal is to provide information and topics to keep our hometown heroes' relationships safe and code 4. I'm your host, Cindy Doyle, LEO wife and licensed professional counselor. Thanks for joining me today. So, husband and I recently went on a trip. By the way, if you can't tell, we like to travel. So that is one of our fun things that we do. And so we went up to Michigan. We had never been to Michigan before. We were actually going up to visit his old chief, his retired chief. I mean, he's old and everything, but anyway, his retired chief and his wife. And we became friendly with them and friends with them. And so we were going up there to visit. And my husband normally likes to plan a little cushion in for when we travel. So there's, a little bit of time if things go wrong. He's not feeling rushed. I, on the other hand, it's rubbing off on me, but I, on the other hand, I'm the person that I have to be on a flight today, and I'm like, well, I have TSA pre-check. I can get through security pretty quickly. I'm just taking on a bag. The flight leaves at 3:30. If I get there at 3, it should be fine. Yeah, that doesn't work in his world. We have to get to the airport 2 hours ahead and plan and all that good stuff. So for whatever reason, when we planned to come home from Michigan, he agreed that we could take a flight that arrived at DFW at 5:30. And so I was thrilled because I'm like, cool, we get to stay in Michigan a little bit longer, hang out a little bit longer. And, I was like, we can get home, it'll be fine. And I was really excited that he was willing to do that for me. And he did. He knows how I am, and I kind of pushed the limit. And so it was really sweet. He was trying to, what Gottman would say, turn toward me and say, okay, I'm going to lean into, I'm going to give you the influence. He was being influenced by me, all these really great things. But I think you can know something's coming, right? So weather in Michigan was cold. It was nice. But the day we had to leave, there was a storm. And little tiny Alpena, Michigan, where we flew in, let me tell you, this is the smallest airport I have ever been to. So small that you don't go through security until the plane is out on the runway because there's no place to go. There is one gate at this airport. And when you walk off the plane, you have to go outside, down the steps outside, and then you go into the, the gate or whatever, quote unquote. And when we got off, I walk in thinking it's going to be like an airport, and there's everybody, all the visitors, because they don't have the suitcase. They hand deliver it to you. This is how small this airport was. So it's raining, and we're there on Sunday. He has to be at work on Monday. He has to be at work on Monday. And we are, actually, it's Monday, Labor Day, and we both had to be at work on Tuesday. And so there's a storm, and we're watching the rain. Of course, we're going to have to walk out into the rain, which doesn't make him happy to begin with. But so we're sitting there, and we finally get on the plane, but he keeps doing the looking at his watch thing, and looking at his watch, and looking at his watch, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be bad. Because we had to catch a flight in Detroit, which, by the way, the Detroit airport is amazing. If you live in Detroit, or if you go through Detroit, Detroit's not a bad place to get a layover. Let me tell you, I was shocked at this airport. It's got a little fountain. It's got a good espresso bar. You can do some shopping there. Anyway, so, but you do have to go through this tunnel underground, and it's got this tram inside. There's a little bit of distance to get to gates and things like that. So we are sitting on the Alpena runway because it's raining and there's weather. And I know in his mind, he is thinking, we're going to miss our flight. We're going to miss our flight. We're going to miss our flight. And I can just see him getting more and more irritated. And I know where that irritation is coming from, but we can't do anything to control it, right? It's just the weather. It's not like the pilot said, hey, you know what? Let's get some bad weather today and let's delay our flights. So that's not what happened, but you can't control the weather. There's nothing you can do about it. So we're sitting there on the runway, and it's obvious that we are probably going to miss our flight to Detroit, because our flight is now, I think, 45 to 50 minutes delayed. We're sitting in the plane. So it's obvious. And so I can just feel him radiating this, and I get it. Like he's irritated because he's thinking, how am I going to get home? He's anticipating negative stuff. Whereas I, at this point in my life, kind of go, whatever, we'll figure it out. I think I used to be more like that, but I think just as I've gotten older, I'm like, it's whatever at this point. But he likes to have control. Go figure, right? Like a lot of our first responders, especially cops, like they want to have control over a situation. And he can't. He has no control. He's sitting on a plane. He can't do anything. He can't smoke a cigarette. He's like stuck. So I feel it. And I know better than to say anything, although I'm thinking to myself, like, really? Come on. I'm as irritated as you are, but there's nothing we can do. But I don't say anything because I know. I know if I say something, it's going to be at me, because he can't go yell at the pilot and he can't go yell at clouds. So I just kind of sit quiet. And at some point in time, he says something snarky and sharp. And I really can't remember what he said, because to me, I'm like, it doesn't impact me a whole lot. It sucks. I don't like to receive it, but it might even been at me or toward me, because I might have at this point been like, well, we'll figure it out, or something like that. And I think what it was something like, see, this is why I like to get home the day before I have to be at work, or something like that. My husband sounds horrible. He's really a really awesome guy. It's just I pick on him a whole lot. So anyway, so we have this situation in which he's now irritated, and we sit there. I don't say anything into response, because I know no good is going to come of it. And plus we're in this tiny plane where it's like 2 on one side, and might have been 2 and 2 on both sides, but like tiny, like it had 15 rows or something like that. There was no first class. So we're sitting there, and I know there's no good between the two of us arguing about this or getting heated. And so I just let him do his thing. And probably about 5 minutes later, he turns to me and he says, I'm sorry, I'm not mad at you, it's the situation. And I said, I know it's the situation, I get it, I know you're concerned, and then we're able to talk about it. And that's taken a lot of practice. That's him taking on a lot of ownership. Like I cannot say enough about his willingness to say, hey, I screwed up. And that's something that means a lot to me and a lot in our relationship. But this brought up a topic for me that I wanted to share with you that you probably deal with, especially if you're dealing with first responders or LEOs, because when they come home, there's a lot of things that they have to deal with that they don't have control over, and it has to go somewhere. And so I call it the kick the cat scenario, or the kick the cat syndrome, but there's actually something that it's called. It's called, you ready for this? The Frustration Displacement Syndrome. Did you get that? Let me say it one more time. Frustration Displacement Syndrome. But it's basically kick the cat. So, here's what it is. I'm frustrated. There are a lot of things that frustrate us. Traffic frustrates us. Our kids frustrate us. Our bosses frustrate us. I might feel overwhelmed and frustrated. A lot of times it's things we don't have control over, but because we don't have control, we get frustrated. Or things don't go the way we want them to, and we get frustrated. So that frustration has to go somewhere. So, if you think about your kids, right? You don't want to, you get frustrated with them, but the last thing you want to do is really lash out at them, or, it could be your boss. Ugh. So like you get irritated at your boss. Well, you can't say, look, you butthead. You can't say that. You've got to just shut up and try to respond in this adult way when you really want to throw a little temper tantrum or throw a coffee cup at his head. So, that's the frustration. And so what happens oftentimes is that there's an aggressive displacement of that frustration. And so in my scenario, in this situation, obviously he can't go up to, he could, I guess he could go up to the pilot and yell at him, but that's just going to get him removed from the plane, and that's going to make us even later. So that's not good. And he knows that. So can't yell at the pilot. It's not his fault. You can't call the airlines and say, hey, morons, get my plane off the ground. You can't call God and get mad about the weather. I guess, whatever. You can't talk to the weatherman or do something about it. You can't adjust the clouds. So it goes somewhere. And unfortunately, that's why I said I knew it was coming. Unfortunately, sometimes it goes to you. And that doesn't mean it's okay. It is something to kind of go, all right, this is what that is. So, how do you deal with this? And I know I do this too. Unfortunately, my business partner probably gets some of this. She's like, you've been really short with me. I'm like, well, yeah, it's not you. So there's things, we might get mad at our animals. That's why I call it kick the cat. I have a dog, but I don't kick my dog. Yeah. So, but I know people get mad, or towards your kids, sometimes things can trickle downhill, kind of a thing. So your boss might get irritated at you, and you come home and you get irritated at your kids, or your spouse or whatever. So how do you deal with it? First of all, you have to, if you are struggling with this or with the anger, you have to recognize that it's going on, that it's happening. So that's the first thing, is admitting you have a problem is half the problem, right? Or that's halfway, whatever that saying is. But, you have to understand, okay, this is what's going on. I can't control it. I'm getting angry. And breathing is really the number one thing to do, is to breathe through it and to go, okay, I can't control this, and to just to work on that breathing and calming down is the very first thing. The second part that I would say is that if you can actually state what you're feeling in a productive way, then do it. So if I was to say, man, I'm really worried about what time we're going to get home, and if I'm going to get enough sleep tonight to make my shift, I can deal with that. I can say, oh my God, yeah, I get it. I have an 8 o'clock client. So then I can have empathy, or then whoever you're with can have empathy, but you're also expressing it in a way that you're displacing the frustration in a healthy way. And so you can move through it. And when somebody can give you compassion or some empathy, it's amazing. And you're like, ugh, yes, this sucks. I hate it. So moving through it that way. The other thing to think about is, if you're struggling with this, is to think about, are there any thoughts I can change? So a lot of times those thoughts are, it's being done to me. And so then it becomes very personal. And so if we can work on saying, okay, this isn't personal, it's somebody else, it's the weather, or, they were short with me, but that's because they're struggling with stuff. I can think differently about that. That's helpful as well. So let me flip around to the other side. The other side of this would be if you are on the receiving end. So like I said, I can kind of feel when it's coming. Like he does some behaviors that tell me, oh, this isn't going to go well. You don't need to be on eggshells. That's if I could communicate anything to you, is that it's not, if you feel you're on eggshells, then you need to talk to your spouse in a very kind and loving way about how their anger impacts you and what you need in order to feel safe. And that's how I would recommend having that conversation, is that if you're feeling like you're on eggshells because of their displacement, their aggressive displacement, then that's a conversation to have when things are very copacetic and calm, not at the moment when they're displaying it. They're not going to be able to receive it. Okay, so providing you've had some kind of conversation that you cannot be on eggshells, it can be a little nervous. It can make it, honestly, it can make me a little anxious, like, uh-oh, I can feel it coming. So the first thing what I would say is don't respond, don't engage, because when you engage, it's like you just got hooked by a fishing line, like you are off and running and it's going to get bad. So if you cannot engage and let that person have their moment, then you let it go. Now, I understand sometimes that can be, maybe it can be embarrassing. Maybe you can be like, oh my God, people are looking at us, or, that's something that you can work through. This is about them. This doesn't, you might feel like it reflects on you, but it doesn't. We're on a plane with a bunch of people that we're never going to see again. I could care less what they think about. Or is it I couldn't care less? I don't care what they think about. And it's whatever, I'm there for him. He's struggling. There's moments that I've struggled. I mean, I've done things before and popped off. So it's about being there and supporting each other in that moment that you can't hold it together. So first of all, so don't respond. Second of all, you're going to have to take care of yourself a little bit. So take some deep breaths yourself. Just remain calm. Maybe even remind yourself that this is their struggle. You might even think about, okay, they're maybe feeling out of control. They might be feeling anxious. You might think about that, and give them a little space. And if you need to, you can say, hey, I know this is hard. I know you're worried about work, or I know you're worried about this, or hey, I get it, like today was a crappy day. If you want to say something like that, you can, because it's when you say that they feel heard and understood, and that can sometimes bring it down, because then they don't feel so alone in what they're going through. The last part of that is revisit it. Make sure you revisit the behavior. Make sure you let them know, hey, when that happened, this is how I felt. Or this was the story in my head. Maybe, I didn't feel this way, but maybe it's like, oh my gosh, it's all my fault. I booked these flights. And so then that would be a problem. And so that might be something that you need to talk through, but you tell them how you feel and have a conversation around that. Once again, when things are calmer. What's great, like I said, is if somebody can recognize what they're going through and what they've done, and come back and take ownership. If you have popped off, if you come back around and say, hey, look, that was mine. Sorry about that. This is what's really going on. Then that would be fabulous. And what that then does is allows your partner, your spouse, to be able to do that more frequently for you. It's still your responsibility to manage that displacement, but if you take ownership and seek forgiveness, I think there's a big difference in apologizing and seeking forgiveness. That is something that helps. So in seeking forgiveness, you take ownership of your behavior. So and you apologize too. So think about how that cycle impacts your world. I think as first responders and first responder couples, we see that frequently. And it's something that both parties need to understand they're part of it and how they can help to change that and move that to a different place so that everybody can feel safe in the relationship and in the family, but then that there's also growth and ownership and change so it doesn't keep happening. Let me know what you think about the topic this week. Let me know how you deal with that or what you struggle with in your relationship. Do you experience some of that? What works for y'all? What doesn't work? If I need to talk more about this topic in a different way, let me know. I would love to hear about that. You can find me on social media. I am on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Pinterest and Instagram, and we also are posting the videos on YouTube, so you can check them out there and share them on social media that way. You can also contact me via email on my website. You can go to code4couples.com, and that's the number 4, and just in there's a contact me form, and you can fill that out and send me an email. Let me know what you think. I would really love to know what y'all are thinking about the podcast. If you could drop me just like 2 words like "this sucks" or "hey, you know what, keep on keeping on," something like that, so I know what's working and what's not. What are you enjoying? What are you not enjoying? What do you want to hear in the future? I would love to hear some feedback from y'all, so that would be great. Also, I would love for you to follow any of my social media and also share information or the podcast with other LEO couples, first responder couples, or with anybody else that you think it might help. That would be great. So thanks for joining me and listening this time. And until next time, keep your relationship code 4.